Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, Pete B. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my co-host Sam is here with me as always. Sam, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man? How are we doing? Recording a little earlier in the week than normal. It's a Monday night, but excited to talk about the second half of the season with you.
Yeah, it's weird to hop on a Monday and we're getting our notes together. Normally Monday's tough, but we wanted to get this one out because we are going to be bringing so much content in August. And I wanted to fire off part 2 of these opponent previews is what we're going to get to tonight. The coaches poll actually came out today already, Sam. You can tell we're getting close to the season if the coaches poll comes out.
Yeah, and especially when I think we've reached a point in college football where no one really argues over the coaches poll anymore. And I think that's a good step for everybody.
It is probably the dumbest poll because everyone knows the coaches aren't doing it.
Yeah.
And if they were doing it, we know they're inherently biased, but we were not in it. But we don't care about that. Tech was not in the coaches poll. That's okay. We also have, you'll notice on the screen, some new album art. So our overall album art for the show, there's an honorary patch, 10 seasons of Two Deep. 2024 will mark the 10th season of Two Deep. And obviously Sam is here for season number 10 upcoming.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie is going to join me and Sam for our season preview so he can get an even 10 under his belt and kind of tell you what his future plans are. I know some of our listeners have been missing Rob, kind of missed the dynamic that we used to have on the show, while also complimenting Sam on all the information that he brings to the table on the show.
Dude, it's crazy. I was texting you a couple weeks ago once we got the logo finalized and everything. I was like, I remember being a freshman at Virginia Tech in the fall listening to this podcast. And so it is crazy to me to first off be on it. It's cheesy, but I'm honored to be on it. And then second, you were one of the OG Hokie podcasters. You were at the very beginning of when podcasting became a thing. I feel like that was 2014 to 2016 was that 18-month window that I think it really took off. And dude, 10 years is most startups don't make it 10 years. I know that from my minor.
You know what? And you know what? Most startups don't make any money either. And that's what we're about here on this show. Because me and Rob for a long time were, unsponsored, uninterested, really. We just wanted to be a voice in the community, provide something for Hokie fans to listen to. And it's been a lot of fun. And we might talk a little bit more about that when we get Rob on the season preview. But yes, 10 seasons of preview and recapping every game. We're doing a lot more off-season content than Two Deep ever has. And that's a credit to the partnership with Sons of Saturday. It's been a lot of fun to work with you and all the other guys that are over there. I feel like everyone's a little bit more motivated when you have all these voices that are energetic and supportive and all that good stuff. Hustlers. I mean, Pat and Billy are hustlers, and it's fun to work with people like that.
Yeah, it is crazy. And the team that we've built out, we have a really good team heading into this fall of eight people on the football beat this fall, 4 podcasters. That's not to mention Mike and Ed that'll be getting into hoop season here. And we're 3.5 months away from hoop season. So there is an army of Sons of Saturday content creators coming your way. And I couldn't be more happy about it. We got Robert and Brett back on after some big life things for them. Brett just got married this weekend, actually. Brett, so congrats to our guy.
Brett was Smith. On when we were setting the table for the seating that we did, the bracket of the best wins since 2000. Brett was on one of those shows with us and did the Locks of Saturday with you for many episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's going to be an awesome fall. Best we've had since Sons of Saturday inception.
Yeah, man. I agree. So why don't you kick us off with a cheers?
Well, my cheers has nothing to do with Sons of Saturday. Quite frankly, it has nothing to do with Virginia Tech. My shout out is to the United States men's indoor volleyball team. Big quarterfinal W against gold medal favorites Brazil today. They move on to the semifinals. I'm wearing my Virginia Tech Club volleyball shirt right now. It's a young team that was kind of in this weird transition phase a few years ago, but they've really stepped it up. TJ DeFalco is insane on the outside. They're playing really well. I think at this point they might be the gold medal favorites. So really rooting for the U.S. indoor team as they go along. It's been a really great tournament from those guys.
Cheers.
And if you've never watched indoor volleyball at either the D1 or the Olympic level, you need to, because your mind is going to be blown with how athletic these players are.
I do enjoy the beach volleyball. Cheers, Sam.
Beach is insane. Beach is a different animal.
And we also should mention Noah Lyles and his win in the 100-meter yesterday.
Yes.
Ever so close, but he is the fastest man in the world by a smidgen. And that was really fun to watch those heats and then that final race. No one knew who was the winner until we saw that video photo finish. Okay, talked about the art, talked about the coaches poll, did some of that stuff. One more bit of housekeeping. We are doing a Hokies season kickoff party at Ardent Craft Ales in Richmond, 8/17. Something Sam and I talked a little bit about on the show already. It is set Ardent. It's right in Scott's Addition from 4 to 7 p.m. on 8/17. There is a Facebook link, which will be in the description of this show on both the pod feed and on YouTube, that you can click and RSVP. If you're going to come and you're on Facebook, do a quick click and say RSVP, just so we have a general idea how many people we might expect. No tickets. This is just cash bar, casual, happy hour, come as you are type vibe. Just to chill with us. We might do a little recording. We'll have a little bit of swag, maybe some new stickers, pins, that kind of thing. And just to hang out and drink some beer with some high quality Hokies, talk about the season, make some predictions, some bold predictions for this upcoming year, and maybe tell some stories from back in the day. That's what Ardent's going to be all about. 8/17, 4 to 7 p.m. Again, if you can, RSVP. I'm actually thinking I might post something on the site just with the details of this, just so people can find it easily. But it'll be posted on Twitter feed, Instagram, everywhere. But please join us at Ardent on 8/17. I'm excited about that, Sam.
Yeah, and Ardent's a great spot. I used to live right by there. They have a nice indoor outdoor combo going on right in the heart of Scott's Addition, and they have some great beer as well. Looking forward to testing and rating some.
Definitely. To put some on the Untapped for sure. And we are on Untapped 2 Deep VT if you want to follow us there as well. ACC media poll came out, Sam. Let's get to some fun stuff in the news and notes. I got the poll on the screen, and you can see the Hokies come in at number 6. And that's pretty much to be expected. That's where we came in many of the prognostications, magazines, whatever. The interesting thing about this, what several people have pointed out, is our ACC opponents and where they fall on this menu. And you can see Clemson is number 2, Miami is number 3, but after that, you got to go down to 9 to find an opponent, 11, 12, 14, 16, and 17, where, I got 16 is Virginia and 17 is Stanford. So a lot of our opponents fall later in what the media thinks is going to happen this year.
Yeah, and I think it sets up really nicely. I mean, Kyron Drones said kind of multiple times at ACC Media Days, he kind of mentioned like the schedule sets up really well for us. Like, guys pay attention to this stuff and they know their opponents. And I think Tech got a really favorable draw. Somewhat unfortunately, so did NC State. And I think it's, Tech and NC State are the two teams that need to take care of business. Louisville and Miami have a bit tougher in conference schedules. So that top 6 is really, really interesting. I think any of those 6 teams could win the ACC this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this is funny too, because every year, like, remember when Elko took over for Duke, a team that we're going to talk about tonight? They were projected to basically be last in the ACC, last or second to last, just be terrible. And they were not terrible. They were actually really, really competitive. And so take these rankings for what they are worth. And to the person that put BC with a first place vote, yes, number 14 is BC in this poll, but they got 1 first place vote. I critiqued it online. Is it possible? In theory, yes, it is possible.
It is technically possible.
Extremely, extremely unlikely, and he should probably have his vote revoked. Nevertheless, anything is possible at this point in the season. This is merely the media's opinion. And once again, we can see Miami is pretty close to being back, according to the media.
We talked about Miami last week. We'll talk about some of these teams, but as interesting as 1 through 6 is, I think 7 through 10 is equally as interesting, because SMU and Cal, the newbies, have some built-in advantages, but teams having to travel to them, but also just as many disadvantages. And, SMU, really talented team from last year. Can they hold up to the ACC? Cal, a team with some offensive talent. Can they get better on defense? And then North Carolina is kind of a wild card at number 8. We don't really know what we're going to get out of that team this year. So I think this ACC 1 through 10 is as much of a toss up as any Power 4 conference plus Pac-12, Power 5, RIP, as much of a toss up 1 through 10 as I can remember in the college football playoff era.
I agree.
I don't remember a conference being like this.
I think it goes down to 10. I know there was a gap in the votes, I think from maybe 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 somewhere, but GT or Cal being 6th or 5th or 3rd in the conference, would that be terribly surprising to you?
No, it wouldn't be surprising if Syracuse found their way up there. I mean, we'll talk to the Orange, but like with what they did in the transfer portal, they're a completely new team, and they could move their way up there.
I do think Duke is
who knows?
Probably that's as high as they would finish at number
11.
I think they'll go lower than that. But yes, we will get to the details on Duke. The All ACC team was part of the media release that came out last week, and we had 2 guys on the first team All ACC, and they only had one team, and it was just called the All ACC team. Strong and Peebles made it. Drones did get some consideration for Player of the Year. He was 4th in the Player of the Year voting behind Cam Ward, number 1, Hampton, number 2, and then Barrett Carter, defensive guy, at number 3 for Clemson. So pretty nice slotting for Drones to come in 4th in that voting. And then if you go down a little bit further, Tootin was number 10 and APR was number 11. And if APR has 15 sacks this year, like, he could win ACC Player of the Year.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing, man, a few years ago, Tech had nobody even sniffing first team. And now we got 3 guys in the top 11 for Player of the Year. Like, that's the roster turnover that this program has had. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it sure is. And so Miami had the most selections on the All ACC team with 5. I think this was out of 27 guys because they included specialists. So 5 for Miami, 4 for FSU, Clemson with 3, and then a handful of teams with us that had 2. That's going to do it for that stuff. Let's move on to some Hokie news. A little bit of the stuff that came out with the beginning of fall camp. Position change for Asen Stevens. You guys might not be familiar with Asen Stevens. He came in as a linebacker, very promising player, and he might see a legacy. I feel like, or his dad played college football somewhere. Either way, he has moved to defensive line. He's up 4 pounds according to the heights and weights update to 245, but he is playing defensive line. And 245, you probably should be playing defensive line. That would be a very heavy linebacker for us. And I also noted with the position changes, and this isn't so much a change as a clarification, Caleb Spencer listed as a linebacker, which again makes sense for him. He was playing a little bit of safety, a little bit of DB at Miami, some linebacker. He looks like he's going to be a linebacker. Again, his weight, it looks more like a linebacker's kind of weight as well.
Nobody's talking about Caleb Spencer. I feel like he has flown as under the radar as a transfer could. This is a guy who was a prominent recruit out of high school, has shown some flashes. I think he could be a really big rotational player for the Hokies at linebacker. And I think as for the move for Asen Stevens, he was a guy who was, I believe he was a 4-star who got dropped to a 3-star. He was a high
recruit for sure.
And like he was one of those like high 3-star, low 4-star, depending on where you looked, guys. And it is really, really hard to adapt to the athleticism of D1 football. And I think sometimes you see guys who they get on campus and you're like, oh, this guy's not going to be fast enough, but he's still a very good football player. So I think early in their career, bulk him up, get him in the weight room, see if he can be kind of a quick twitch defensive end, D-tackle hybrid guy to clog up space. Thinking like Woody Barron-esque is that kind of position mold if you want to think of a former Hokie. So he's a good football player, but I don't think linebacker was going to work out for him at this level.
Yeah, and I like the depth on D-line. He's going to be battling. He's only a redshirt freshman. He has plenty of time, and we are going to lose guys in this next offseason. So we'll need more defensive linemen to step up. A couple more of the updates as far as the weights go. And a lot of this I got from 247, so I want to give them credit. But Malachi Thomas was up 8 pounds, which I thought was significant for someone that has typically been pretty slight throughout his career. XTB was up 7 pounds. That's nice. Chan's up 7 pounds as well at the wide receiver position. Some of our offensive linemen put on a lot of weight. I noticed that Chaplin was up 11. The Moore brothers both put on 11 plus. Brody Meadows up 13. Ganem up 16 pounds. Williams was up 18 pounds. That's Lance Williams, 18 pounds. Aiden Lynch up 18 pounds. And they might have been going off high school weights. I'm not exactly sure with some of these other guys. And then Gunnar Givens up at 322 on the Hokies roster. That is 36 pounds of weight gain for Gunnar Givens now that he's made the position switch to the offensive line.
I mean, dude, like that guy was too dominant, too physically dominant in high school not to contribute on the football field. And I know he's had injury issues and that's like totally out of his control, like real injury issues. Like I think he had a broken wrist or something. Dude has got to be a good football player. Like somewhere in there is a really good football player and they just need to try to unlock it. Hopefully they can on the offensive line.
He was a top 200 guy, right? I mean, he was
like a consensus top 200 guy.
So, and he was projecting out at offensive line and Pry let him play defensive line. At least that's how it seemed like it went down to me, but he has now put on some serious weight and is up to 322 on the offensive line. On the defensive line, APR up 8 pounds, 252. Burgos up 8 pounds, 253. McDonald up 10 pounds, 253. Finlater up 10 pounds. Abby, Dandy, and Jeanette up 15 to 16 pounds. So that both lines are putting on some serious weight. That should be a shout out to Mr. Galt and the things that he's doing in the weight room. And then Spencer. I actually didn't say this. He's up 16 pounds. Caleb Woodson up 9 pounds at the linebacker position. Jenkins is up to 219. That's Keonta, one of our starters at star. And then Gabe Williams, 200 pounds now as a true freshman. That's a good weight for him. He might take some time to put some more weight on that frame because he can hold a lot more.
He's lanky. Like he's a lanky dude. You can tell he grew like 4 or 5 inches in high school. So if he puts on pounds, he could be a real monster.
Last couple updates because I know I'm probably boring the listeners, but Mansour and Braylon Johnson both up 5 pounds. Reddish up 13 pounds. That's a true freshman coming in at the safety position. He's 200 and Stroh is at 200. So Reddish seemingly has the size to contribute right away if he can show it on the field.
Don't think we have a problem with players drinking their protein shakes anymore. That's what it sounds like to me.
Camp notes other than weight updates. I've got Burgos getting thrown out of practice. That was the big news, the headliner that everyone was going to. You got to kick off camp somehow, right? Get hot under the collar.
Okay, tinfoil hat. I thought about bringing tinfoil to do this for those on YouTube. Tinfoil hat. I think this is canned.
Yeah, because they happened last year too, right? Not with him, but with another player.
Mm-hmm. At the exact same situation.
He was swinging on Parker Clements, to be clear. That's what we were told was happening. And there's just a picture of our shorter head coach trying to push away the giant that is Keyshawn Burgos. And that was a pretty funny picture.
Exact same situation as last year. I think both on the same day of practice.
It was early for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but yeah, you like to see the guys getting a little hot. Yeah. I know Pride, he said all the right things afterwards. Hey, we can't have someone hurting the team, but we all like to see a little bit of fire, right?
I'm pretty sure there was a video from the Pittsburgh Steelers camp where they get into a scuffle and Mike Tomlin just starts laughing and grinning as they're scuffling with each other. Like this is such a quintessential football thing. Mm-hmm. It is. You want that kind of energy when it's 90 some degrees outside and those guys are going at it, because if you don't have that, that's a really bad problem.
Yeah. You usually see it a little bit later
into camp. That's why I think I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if he says, hey, if you get in a scuffle, throw a little boom.
It's okay. Yeah.
And I'll make an example out of you. You'll be fine. And we'll move on with camp.
I do have big hopes for Burgos this year. And
I do too.
When we get to our season previews and stuff, that's going to be a guy I probably focus on for some of my D-line talk. But we had an update on the offensive line in terms of the starters, at least who's running with the first team: Chaplin, Braylon Moore, Caden Moore, Bob Schick, Parker Clements. That sounds familiar. That was the exact same offensive line we ran out there a bunch last year. You'll notice that Montavious Cunningham not running with first team right now. But there are some rumors about Johnny Garrett potentially challenging Clements on the one side. We know Ganem has played a little bit of both, but Ganem looks like he's the other the other tackle right now, behind Chaplin, and then Meadows and Lance Williams, I guess, would be the other two. Now, Williams is listed as the backup center right now, if you go by this like first string and second string. But it's been talked about that the other Moore brother would just fill in probably at center if you had to. You put Braylon if Caden were to go down.
Yeah, and what I'll tell people is offensive line pairings, they will change practice to practice at this point in the season.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to find what meshes. You're trying to see who takes to the scheme best, who's in the best shape. It changes throughout camp. So I think you will get a better picture a week or so before the Vanderbilt game. It would not surprise me if Cunningham ends up starting at that right guard spot, but it also, if Bob Schick is a guy who's been in the program, been in the weight room, if he's improved, maybe you keep that continuity because, again, this is an offensive line that really struggled in the first half of last season, but was above average in the second half of last season. You look at pretty much the OL push metrics that are put out there, and you look at Tech's rushing yards per game. Outside of that Louisville game, Tech was a very good rushing offense.
Definitely. They made a lot of progress, and it's looking like we may have 8, 9 this year without too much drop off. I know the tackle positions are always dicey, but it's looking a lot better than where we were a year ago. Cole Nelson getting a lot of love as a leader. He is the carrier of the lunch pail, and we saw him play so much better down the stretch. Not that he was ever bad. It was just you could see improvement happening, and by the time he got to UVA, he was kicking ass.
Yeah, it seems like he was one of the players in that Louisville game, along with the other 21 starters, who had a really bad game that day. And after that, he played really, really well. And Brent Pry has said he's not a big splash play guy, but when he does the right thing, he always seems to make the play. And I think Tech's defense kind of needs some of that because there are big playmakers. You have APR, Kelly Lawson, like when he's in the right area, makes a great play. Jalen Stroman is another guy like that. But if you have that one defensive end keeping contain, that can funnel it to all your other playmakers. So it's going to be really big for him to have a good year.
Yeah, it's just so encouraging because we all hear little things about camp and who's doing well, and it just seems like every day I'm hearing about a different guy that's looking really good. And so that's nice. Mose Phillips, speaking of guys looking good, might be the starter across from Jalen Stroman. That's something Pry talked a little bit about. It's something me and you talked about when we were discussing the Athlon preview, how they had Jalen Jones in there, and we're like, well, I think it's probably going to be Mose. And it's trending in that direction. Jones could hold him off. He's the older guy, but Mose has, since he got to Tech, they've been talking about Mose and his playmaking ability.
Yeah, and I think the one issue with Mose Phillips last year was to go into the college football 25 video game analogy, he was a little too hit stick and not enough press A to break down and tackle. It got him in some trouble. He had some missed tackles, had some targetings, but athletically, he is a step up from, I think, anything Tech has back there. And he's one of your safeties for the future. So I think he's going to be the starter. I think there's a lot of film on Jalen Jones that Jalen Jones can be serviceable at points, but also had some really bad games last year. And I think with how important safeties are to this defense and really how important the middle of this defense is to the scheme that Brent Pry runs, you got to go with the higher upside guy at that other position. So I think Mose Phillips is going to be your starter against Vandy.
And if nothing else, it just means that the depth has
for
increased
Yeah.
a nice amount. So that's good. And PJ Prelude, final thing, the standout from the spring game, he's battling with Coney for that RB3 spot. That's at least the word on the street. We'll see. And hey, that's another position because we had that other kid that just came in, the one who broke all the records in high school.
Mason?
Tyler
Mason.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the running back room looking healthy as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, God forbid something happened to Thomas or Tootin, but having depth at that position is so key because there were games last year where Tootin was not close to 100%.
Yep.
So, it maybe there's a game where Tech gets up early and Tootin only has 5 or 6 carries.
And we got a bulked up Malachi that could carry the load, or Coney or Prelude.
That would be okay with me.
Okay, the couple of recruits may be announcing towards the end of the month. One of them's a pretty big one. And then Peyton Falzone is in the top 247 for 2026. That just came out. He is was he number 211, something like that.
He's rising up the ranks since that Virginia Tech commitment. We talked about that.
We don't say that too often.
We don't say that too often. He's definitely a guy to watch this fall. Like if you're even somewhat into recruiting, Google his name, see what his stats are. Because he's a guy who fits the mold of a big time quarterback, and he's rising up the ranks. He's a very young player, so one to keep an eye on.
Definitely. Okay, if you're watching, before we get to our previews, we're going to start with Boston College in 1 second, but make sure you like the video and you are subscribed to the Sons of Saturday channel. Hit the thumbs up. Subscribing is just as easy as hitting the thumbs up. We've gotten a lot of subscribers over the last month and a half or so, but it is August now, and me and Sam and Billy and Pat and all the guys, Rich is going to be on helping me with something this week that you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you are subscribed. Also, CFB Monday is coming back 8/19. Me and Sam are going to be recording that Monday night. So we're talking about Mondays. Well, Mondays are about to get a lot busier over the next 3 or 4 months because we're moving College Football Monday. It's going to be at nighttime now. Me and Sam are going to either be doing it together, individually, splitting duties, whatever. But it's going to be awesome, and we're going to do full playoff predictions and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Talking some teams other than the Hokies as well as the Hokies. So it'll be a fun time. It'll round out your college football.
Yeah, it's our national show, but there's always going to be a heavy VT slant portion in the show. So it's not, if you love college football and you love the Hokies, it'll be a perfect show for you if you didn't watch with us last year. All right, Boston College, Sam, 10-17, 7:30 on ESPN. This is our big Thursday nighter this season. Last year it was Syracuse, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes down the road here. But Boston College coming in on a Thursday night, they actually are a little bit higher in some of these preseason rankings than I would have expected. FPI has them at 58, Athlon 57, Lindy 63, Steele 58. So those are all very tightly packed. We are right around the 60th best team in the country is where they're projecting Boston College. Their 2023 record was 7-6. Didn't seem like it, but they did have a winning record. They went 3-5 in the ACC. They won their bowl game. They beat new ACC member SMU, and they got a new coach because even though they had a winning season, Jeff Hafley decided to split.
Well, so they had a winning season. They lost to a bad Northern Illinois team by 3 at home. They beat Holy Cross by 3 at home. Lost close to Florida State, got blown out by Louisville, only won by 3 to Virginia, only won by 3 against Army, only won by 7 against UConn, only won by 7 against Syracuse, and then they got blown out by Virginia Tech and Miami. This is a team that scheduled their way to a bowl game last year. And I think Hafley was either going to be on the hottest of hot seats or he was going to take an NFL job. And I think that was the right career move for him, taking that.
He
NFL
got a life
job.
raft, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And I think Bill O'Brien comes in and good offensive coach, not someone known for his ability to put together and maintain a roster, both at the college and NFL level. I think that's going to be very interesting long-term in the transfer portal era. But I look at this roster now, they return some guys, but they return guys who did not perform well last year against better competition. And so I'm a little bit worried about Boston College in year 1 of Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien is a very interesting hire, right? Because this is not a career college football coach. He's mostly been an NFL guy. He had one very famous stint at Penn State after the Sandusky stuff happened, and he kind of righted that program in a very trying time. But he was only at that program for a couple years. He has not been this long-term college football program builder. He got the standard Saban, whatever you want to call it, like pat on the back by working for him for a year at Alabama. It might've been 2 years, but he was the offensive coordinator down there. I'm not sure those fans loved what he was doing, although Bama fans are hard to please. Yeah. But so he gets the Ohio State job as the offensive coordinator this year. And then Hafley leaves and he decides to go, and Chip Kelly comes over to Ohio State. But that worked out so well for Ohio State, in my opinion. If you're just talking about offensive minds, I don't even like Chip Kelly, but that is a W for Ohio State.
It's a massive W, and it's crazy how the coaching carousel now seems to be so far-reaching. Like it impacts so many programs. What I think is most interesting about this hire, I was talking with AJ Black, who writes for 247, covers Boston College, good friend of the program, and he was saying after they made this hire, like, this is the splash money new age hire that Boston College needed to make to get interest back in the program. That is a pro sports town. You bring in a pro sports guy from the Boston area. Like, his wife is from the Boston area. He obviously had time with the Patriots as well earlier in his career. They feel like this was a move just as much to get interest in the program that it was to win in 2024. So I think long-term, this could work a little bit, but it's going to be really tough with this roster because Bill O'Brien loves to throw the football. Thomas Castellanos, that is not his strength.
No.
And they do not have the receiving core for that. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see those two worlds collide this year.
Yeah, it's weird because I would have said the Bill O'Brien hire is an uninspired college football hire based on his age, based on his previous acumen, but based on location and the town that he's in. You're right. It is kind of an inspired hire.
It's
I don't
Boston
think
College
it's
is
going to work
different
out that well. And BC, like, what is working out? It's a very, if you can win 8 games a year at BC, you're amazing. Like,
yeah,
that,
I mean, they've
on any kind of consistent basis.
They've tried the hard-nosed defensive guy with Adazio. They tried it with Halfley, and it just doesn't work in modern football. Like, it just doesn't work. And
no. I just a guy who hasn't coached in college since 2013, and when he did coach in college, it was for 2 years. Like, that's what I should say, he had a year at Alabama, but a head coach in college, he hasn't been a head coach in college since 2013. It's over a decade now. And so that, I don't know. It just seems odd to me, but I get it. And the way you framed it is actually really interesting. Last year for BC, you talked about all those close wins they had. 4 3-point wins, 2 7-point wins. They managed to, like, take care of Georgia Tech, no problem. That was like the one game that they were really, like, just put the hammer down. But even against Florida State, they kept it close. This team played a lot of close games, and they went on a 5-game winning streak before they played us, which when we were going into that game, there was a little bit of fear because BC had been playing really well. They've got this running quarterback. And then you look at what those wins were in that 5-game winning streak. It was UVA, Army, Georgia Tech, UConn, and Syracuse. And that Syracuse game was the one where they're, like, starting a tight end at quarterback. And so BC, yes, they had a 5-game winning streak. Castellanos was a bit of a revelation for them as the year went on, but they were never more than a mediocre team. And when we went up there, we beat the crap out of them. And it was awesome. Me and you watched that together on the live stream on this very channel. And that was so much fun. This year, they play at Florida State, at Mizzou, Michigan State, at UVA, at Virginia Tech, Louisville, at SMU, in addition to Q's, UNC, and Pitt at home. That is a tough schedule for a first-year pro head coach.
Dude, I'll tell you, Western Kentucky isn't easy either.
No,
Western Kentucky is not easy. And, like, this team was, last season, they were the 118th rushing defense in the country. They were a sieve. You could just run the ball up the middle against these guys. And that's kind of what Tech did. It was very un-BC-like last year. And I don't know. We talked about this with, we talked about it with Vanderbilt. We talked about it with Old Dominion a bit. Talked about it with Marshall. Like, I don't know if this team got better in the offseason. Like, I don't think they really brought in guys. I know you have some of the transfer numbers with you.
Yeah, I do. And their portal losses weren't significant. Like, they only lost, 10 incoming, 17 outgoing. A bunch of high-quality additions, though. And only 2 of the guys they lost, and this is what I was getting at, went to power conference schools. Now, that speaks a little bit to Halfley's recruiting and it not being super good. But it also speaks to their ability to have retained some of their better guys, because Castellanos, really good retention at the quarterback's position there. He had over 1,000 rush yards last year. I don't know if he said that already, but that is crazy. 5.18 yards per carry for him and 13 rush TDs. That's almost as many as pass TDs that he had. He had 15 pass TDs, 13 rush, and over 2,000 pass yards. So he's a very, very interesting quarterback. And you said the thing about, is Bill O'Brien going to try to make him into a passing quarterback? And that would be a mistake. I think you want it with the running backs that BC has back with Robichaud, and I think there's another kid, Ward, from a former FSU guy that comes over in a transfer. I think he's on his third school now. But they could really do some creative stuff in the run game, because while they do have some weapons on the outside, to me, the strength is Castellanos' running ability and these running backs.
Yeah, for sure. And they have a little issue staying healthy in that backfield. Like Robichaud is a guy who's been hurt for a good amount of his career, but when he's healthy, he's very good. Back to the returning production, I have them as 29th in the country in returning production. So pretty high up there. But again, not all returning production is the same, right? A returning production means a tackle that was 7 yards down the field is equal to a tackle that was 2 yards down the field, right? So I think it is important to realize with this Boston College team that they are not one of the better, they're not a top half roster in the ACC. I would say they're probably a bottom 10 roster in the Power 4. If they're going to win games, it's going to be Castellanos making plays. So when Virginia Tech plays them Thursday night at home, flashbacks, I know, but it is all about keeping the quarterback in the pocket, keeping him under control. Tech should have no problem anywhere else in this game.
Yeah, if we did what we were able to do last year, where we limited him to 46 rushing yards, it was his second worst rush performance of the season. And he played all the games. So we did a really nice job hemming him in. And some of that was because we got up so early and they were kind of forced to do some different things. But that's what you need to do. We should score early, defend the run, sell out on Castellanos and Robichaud and those guys. Because, they could pass to, Kamari Morales coming over from UNC, which I read he's the all-time leader for tight end touchdowns at UNC. He's BC's tight end now. They get a nice tall receiver from Texas Tech and Bradley. Lewis Bond is back. They got some pieces, but the best of both worlds would be if O'Brien keeps some of Castellanos' running ability and maybe some option stuff and that kind of thing, but also coaches up him being able to go through some reads and they balance it right down the middle. That's not going to be easy, but if they do, the O-line is better. They got 3 starters back. They didn't allow too many TFL last year. Like, this offense could be potent. Like, it really could be. And I think it should be better than last year's offense.
Yeah, and that's kind of always the tough part about this, right? Is when you're trying to project forward, how much better will a team get? And we'll get to that with some of the other teams Tech faces. Like UVA, I think, is another team that kind of has that. Like, they have some continuity, they have some options, but are these guys magically going to get better at football? Like, how much does another year in the weight room help you talent-wise? And I think overall, for wrapping this one up, like, Tech should have no problem with Boston College. It should be a fun Thursday night. They should lay the hammer on them. If this Tech team is for real, this is the game you take care of.
Yes. I could not agree more. The schedule for them is really tough. This is not late in the year. It's right in the midway point, but they play a lot of good teams. They could be beat up by this point, and they weren't that good last year, and they got lucky in a bunch of those close games. So yes, the record's a winning record. They beat a couple good teams, but they absolutely got lucky. And you add in new schemes and a coaching staff full of NFL guys, because even their offensive and defensive coordinators, they have like 1 year of college experience in the last decade. I mean, I think the DC might have not coached in college since the 90s. And so this is a very NFL heavy staff. And even though their lines should be better, because I do think the D-line will be significantly improved, O-line should be a little bit better. We're home on a Thursday night. You got to win this game. Like, you owned them last year. You got to win this game. All right, let's move on. Quickly, let's talk about Roback, our sponsor. We love them. We're about to get some new sponsors this year. Roback's not going away, though. You guys can head over to roback.com, get those beautiful polos. They have the Commonwealth. They have the quarter zip, which is called the Berg, the 2-tone maroon with those little Virginias on it. It's beautiful. Use code 2DEEPVT for 20% off your order. Pick up their polos, pick up their women's stuff, the tennis skirts, the joggers, those little dresses that the girls love. Grab them, 2DEEPVT, load up your cart, get 20% off your order. Rhoback Crave activity. For now, Sam, I need to know what you're drinking.
I am drinking a kind of a classic when it comes to the high alcohol craft beers. This is the Victory Berry Monkey. I'm sure you've had Sour Monkey before. This is the Berry Monkey. It is a little bit more raspberry, strawberry type flavor. Then you get a lot of the berries kind of go straight blackberry, blueberry. This one's a little more on the raspberry flavor. It is a sour triple, 9.5%. It is strong. It is sweet. It is tart. It has a little bit of that like triple Belgian aftertaste to it. And for that reason, it's not one of my favorites that I've had. I hadn't had the berry one. I've obviously had the Sour Monkey, a very popular one. Kind of a weird aftertaste. It's a 3.25 for me on Untapped. It's good enough to finish it and it's enjoyable, but it aftertaste is a little weird.
Yeah. And I wouldn't probably argue with you. I'd probably have it a little bit lower because I'm not a sour guy. You said it is tart, right? That's what you're saying.
It is super tart. It is like Sour Patch Kid tart.
Oh wow. Okay.
But then the aftertaste is that like triple Belgian, like very alcohol-y aftertaste, and that turns it off for me.
All right, I am drinking, just keeping it simple, Stone IPA. If you're into West Coast IPA at all, you've had this, and it's a classic. And I may have even had this about a month ago. I don't know. I know I talked about it, Stone, because I had a mixed pack of them, and I have a lot of episodes coming up. So I'm not repeating a beer, but this is a classic for me. I love a good West Coast IPA on occasion, and the Stone never disappoints. I was at Workhorse Brewing on Friday night last week. That's out in Pennsylvania near King of Prussia, and had some really good beers over there. That's a high quality brewery I would recommend. And then I also stopped in at Conshohocken Brewing while I was over in that part of Pennsylvania. And Conshohocken it's actually owned by a Philadelphia sports radio host. And so a lot of the beers are named after various Phillies and Eagles type things, but they have a really good selection, a little bit of a wider selection. You get some traditional English beers, you get Kolsch's, you get obviously your Pilsners and your Hazies, but really nice menu over at Conshohocken. But because I'm drinking kind of a more regular IPA in the Stone, I wanted to at least talk a little bit about other things that I've had recently. While Sam is running out for a second, I'm going to talk about Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech 10-26. They are coming to Blacksburg. This is a team that's given us a bit of a hard time as of late. And similar to Boston College are their rankings. Like if you look at the FPI, they're number 54. BC was 58 in the FPI. In the other rankings, Georgia Tech looks better. And I think that's where most people would have them well ahead of Boston College. Athlon has them at 47th, 9th in the conference. Lindy's has Georgia Tech at 42, Steele 44. And their 2023 record, like BC, 7-6. Although they had a 5-3 record in the ACC, whereas BC was sub 500 in the ACC. But this is another team that I have some takes about Georgia Tech because this is one of those like reminds me of UNC with Sam Howell, where like it could go really, really well, and it's an offensive heavy approach, but it could go poorly. And I'm interested to hear what you have to say about Georgia Tech and Brent Key's third year in the program.
It's like with every positive bullet point you have about the Yellow Jackets, you also have an equally bad negative bullet point. Like they were 120th in total defense in yards per game last year. There's only 134 teams, but they were +4 in turnover margin. They were like a decently good offense, but they had some really bad offensive outputs. They won some big games. They also lost to Bowling Green. They lost to Boston College. So it's like, I think this is a good team. I don't think they are deep enough to go week to week. And I think Haynes King is he's not a quarterback that is going to string together like 12 consecutive good football games.
No.
He's going to look bad at points. And when he looks bad, I don't think the rest of the team is good enough to keep up with it.
Yeah, he threw a lot of interceptions. His rating and his QBR were quite favorable, and that's because of the things that he can do with his legs. He had almost 800 yards rushing last year from the quarterback position and over 6 yards a carry. 10 touchdowns rushing, 27 passing. Is that right? That's 37 total touchdowns for Haynes
No,
King.
he was
that
crazy.
Is super impressive.
He was crazy.
But if you look at Georgia Tech and what they did throughout the year, they were almost perfect at going win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. There was one section of the season where I think they won 2 in a row. Otherwise, it was pretty much even Steven across the board. And if they don't get lucky against Miami, if Miami takes a knee, Georgia Tech doesn't go bowling. That's what we're talking about with this team. Like, yes, they went to the bowl, they won the bowl, but they're not even in that bowl game if Miami takes a knee. And so that's a very interesting way of looking at this team.
I mean, to reiterate that in another way, they were a Miami kneel down away from losing 3 in a row to Bowling Green, Miami, and Boston College.
Yeah. and Miami, while a talented team, they weren't good last year either. And so it was a very weird season for Georgia Tech. But to their credit, they got to the bowl, they won the bowl. And no, none of the wins throughout the season were super impressive. Maybe UNC, maybe the Miami game, maybe the UCF bowl win, but really they didn't do a whole hell of a lot. Offense was good. We talked about Haynes King. Well, they got another Haynes on the team, and that's the running back, Jamal Haynes, 1,000-yard rusher last year, 6 yards per carry for him. And they also get Trey Cooley back, who had 274 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they got that 1-2 punch. And it's interesting with Jamal, he was a former wide receiver. So they can also use him out of the backfield. He's a versatile player. And their wide receiver room is pretty stocked. Is that what your read on it was too? I felt like they had some good talent at the wide receiver position.
I think they have talent all over the field. It's just like, I think they have like 17 to 18 really good football players. I think then behind that, they have 20 to 25 lower half of the ACC players. Like, I don't think they have built this roster up totally yet. So I think that is what leads to some of the hot and cold you see throughout the season.
Yeah, there's a couple all ACC guys on offensive line. 15th fewest sacks in the country last year on a per game basis. Really strong unit up front. And Haynes King helps them with the way he can move around. That is absolutely influencing those stats. But nevertheless, I think their offensive line is pretty good. Both King and Haynes had, I know it sounds weird, but that's the last names of those two players. Both had incredible rushing seasons with over 6 yards a carry. So it's going to be a good offense. Like, this is a dangerous offense, no matter how you slice it. Might not be the deepest thing in the world, but they've got players. They got players, skill position players, running backs, all that kind of good stuff. Defensively is a completely different story. 117th in yards per play last year. That was tied with BC. 130th in rush yards allowed. So they were letting teams run all over them. Offensively, that was a strength. And defensively, rushing was an absolute weakness. And that's something I'm excited about when I look at this matchup, because they were 131st in rush yards per game. And yeah, it was 130 in rush yard average. And so any rushing stat you take, they were awful at it. What else are you seeing from the defense?
I mean, that's kind of it. Like, you didn't really get to see much else against them because teams are able to just run the ball on them. And I think it's going to be really difficult for Georgia Tech this season. If you look at their schedule, they have what I have is the second toughest schedule in the country. I mean, they start off with Florida State. Then they have Georgia State, travel to the Carrier Dome for Syracuse. They'll travel to Louisville. They'll travel to Chapel Hill. And this is the stretch before they play Virginia Tech. At North Carolina, against Notre Dame in Atlanta, at Virginia Tech, and then Miami, NC State, Georgia.
Oh, God.
And I think...
I mean, that's like a 7-game losing streak. How many games is that? 6 games?
I mean, that legitimately might be a 7-game losing. They might lose 8 of 9 to end the year. Like, that is a possibility. Now, I don't think they will do that, but I also think something playing in Virginia Tech's favor is they have extra days of rest. They'll have those extra 2 days because they play a Thursday night game before. And Georgia Tech will be coming off games at North Carolina and against Notre Dame the week before.
Yeah.
If I'm banking at this time in the year, late October, a team that is going to be healthier and deeper, it's going to be the Hokies, barring catastrophe. It is going to be the Hokies by a long shot playing at home. I don't think that is a situation for success for Haynes King.
So the one hope for Georgia Tech defensively is that they did bring in a bunch of new assistants because they're trying to revamp the D-line, and they get guys back on the D-line. They bring in some transfers, all that kind of good stuff. Improve on the 112th ranked tackles for loss per game number. They sucked on that side of the ball. Ken Santucci, the new defensive coordinator, and his new scheme improved that much. And I don't think it will be. And then once you get to the 8th game of the season and they're playing this murderer's row and it's in Lane Stadium, like this is all bad for Georgia Tech. And so, I think their defense will be better, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think we're going to be able to move the ball. I think it could be like a little bit of a wild game. I think
it's going to be
Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, like they have our number a little bit too. Like over the last 8 years or so, I feel like they've come out on top way more often than not. We need to get to King, sacks, turnovers, and just pound the freaking rock.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, this game is similar to, some of the games that we've seen Virginia Tech in the past kind of overcomplicate and not play as well. Just run the ball, play your game, play to your strengths. You're at home. This should not be a very difficult game for Virginia Tech. I think it is a popular upset pick when people are picking Virginia Tech's schedule. I think Georgia Tech is going to be really beat up at this point in the season. And I mean,
they got to go to Ireland right off the bat, I cannot wait to watch that game. I know you're excited about it.
They could win that game. Yeah. Like they could win that game and not make a bowl. That's true. Look at this. They could win that game and beat Georgia State, VMI, Duke, Carolina, and I'll give them one other. I'll give them, NC State at home.
Because that fresh Georgia Tech team, that's a good team. Like that, like a really good offense. And if they can improve it all defensively, they're going to give Florida State hell in Ireland. So let's move to Syracuse, November 2nd, FPI number 70, Athlon 52, Lindy's 56, Steele 57. So FPI is low, despite last year being super high on Syracuse, comes down a whole hell of a lot. Athlon, though, 52. That's a nice ranking for Syracuse, higher than I really would have expected. They're putting a lot of faith in new head coach Fran Brown and all of the change that has gone on in Syracuse. I mean, we're talking about 28 outgoing transfers, 7 of which went to power schools, and 19 new guys. So what do you have to say about Syracuse, Sam? I'll let you get a first stab at this.
Completely different team from the skill positions. I don't think they are going to be very good on the line of scrimmage again. And that's my worry with Syracuse. I think on the outsides, they could give Virginia Tech a lot of trouble. In the interior, I do not think this is a very good team. And Kyle McCord had everything going for him at Ohio State, and he couldn't really run that offense the way they wanted to. How is he going to play with a not so great offensive line and lesser weapons and lesser running backs and a lesser defense? I don't know. So I think this team is maybe the biggest question mark in the ACC because I see the talent. Justice Ross Simmons, really, really good player. LaQuint Allen, when he's healthy, pretty good player.
Gadsden,
when he's healthy,
stud,
pretty good player. But I mean, they got crushed last year. I mean, they couldn't stay healthy and they lost a lot of guys from that team. So they're a massive question mark. I don't like going to the Carrier Dome though. I don't like it.
That is the X factor. And McCord, I think you nailed it because I've talked about this with other people. Yes, he had statistically a pretty solid season at Ohio State. 161 rating is pretty phenomenal. 66% completion. QBR was 8th highest in the country. But you have to consider that wide receiver room and that offensive line and that running back room that he was playing with. This is not that. It's okay. I mean, I'm not saying LaQuint Allen isn't decent. And Gadsden, he might be a better tight end than what they had on Ohio State when fully healthy. Like he is that good. He's a very, very good tight end. But on the whole, the offensive line isn't even close. And last year, Syracuse was 89th in sacks allowed per game. And so that's where Kyle McCord's going to run into it. He was from the town, like right next to where I live, which is kind of funny. But he another Jersey guy, and Fran Brown did some magic on him, got him to come to Syracuse, and good for him. That's what Fran Brown is known for, is being this recruiter. And he got his quarterback. However, he's never been a coordinator, and we don't know if he can coach. And so it's an interesting experiment. It's kind of like Colorado Light is what's going on up in Syracuse. Like bring in the talent and it'll solve the problems. And he's done a really good job of bringing in the talent. And he kept some guys too, like Marlo Wax, 110 tackles last year, 11 and a half tackles for loss. Derek McDonald, another good linebacker. Their second leading tackler, Justin Barron, is also back. He had 7 pass breakups in addition to 90 tackles. Like that guy can really do it all. Clark at the other safety position is good. The defense was good last year. It was a solid defense, and we made them look terrible on a Thursday night. Like Syracuse just had no chance in that game. And I think that some of those games, they just go like that. But this really wasn't a terrible defense, and they're bringing a lot back in the back end. The D-line, you said it. In the middle, this is not a great team. Offensive line, defensive line, they're probably taking a step back, and the offensive line already took a step back last year. And so if they can't protect McCord, it's going to be a very long season for the Orange. I think linebacker will be a strength. Should be a pretty good tackling team. But we should push them around, and it's the dome. Like this comes down to the dome.
Well, it's also, I mean, I'll tell you, it's also, I think there are very few teams that Virginia Tech will play that gives me worries on the outside. And I don't think Tech could man up the entire game on the outside. Syracuse is one of those teams. If Syracuse is able to get Tech out of man coverage, I think that could open up running lanes. I think there could be issues in this game matchup wise for Virginia Tech. So if I'm giving a percentage win likelihood, this is like a 52% for Virginia Tech. Like I think this is where you could see the bad week happen.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the spot, looking at the matchup. Even though I don't see Syracuse as an 8-9 win team, this could be a tough one.
Yeah. And you're going to have to put pressure on McCord and beat him up. And he probably will be a little bit beat up at this stage. We're talking about November 2nd here. But if you can contain Gadsden, I really think Allen, he's a good running back. He's not, the kid they had 2 years ago, Tucker or whatever it was. Contain Gadsden, and I think we'll be able to win the game. Like I really think it may be that simple. You talked about outside, but he's included in that. They have some decent wide receivers. They got a good tight end, but exercising Norfolk and exercising the dome in one season is going to be a challenge, man. But it would be great. It would really be like if we win at ODU and we win this game, that might be the most back I ever feel.
I mean, if Tech wins, we'll talk about the next one here in a second, but if Tech wins this game, ooh, doggy.
Oh yeah. Really, really big game the following week at home against Clemson. Everyone has marked this on their calendar. It's a sellout. It is already a sellout in Blacksburg. They're number 15 in the FPI, 15 in the Athlon. Lindy's is 14. Steele is 13. 2023 record was 9-4. And you have to keep in mind, Clemson started out 4-4. They won their last 5 games. And who has been talked about more, if not Dabo Swinney, this offseason? I mean, there's been so much conversation about him and the use of the portal. And is he falling off? Is he still an elite coach? All this stuff. What are your first couple takes on this game, on this team, and that head coach?
I'll do it in reverse order.
Okay.
On the coach. Dabo is a very, very good football coach. Dabo is doing it Dabo's way. And I think that is going to pay just as many dividends as the transfer portal guy would. Like, I don't think you have to use the transfer portal if you're a program like Clemson. I don't think you have to. as for the program, I think they've had a couple years where they aren't at national title level. I don't think they're at national title level this year, but they are clearly a step above everybody else in the ACC, not named Florida State talent-wise. And I think if you're Virginia Tech heading into this game, you need to leverage every little matchup, every little strategy. You need to leverage the home field, pull out the trick plays. I don't think you need to go crazy 4 verts every play, but I do think Virginia Tech will need a near flawless performance to win this game, just because of what Clemson has up front on the defensive line, the defensive front 7. I think they're going to be much better at the wide receiver room this year than they were last year. They were really beat up. Phil Maffa's a really good running back. Cade Klubnik, not great, but still he's one of the better quarterbacks Tech will play this year. Tech will need a very, very good performance to win this game. A very good performance.
I think that the addition of Garrett Riley last year, an offensive coordinator, was a pretty big disappointment. Would you agree with that?
Oh, it was a massive disappointment.
They were expecting him to come in, kind of unlock Klubnik, unlock that offense. They had Shipley at running back. They had Maffa as his backup. And Maffa was actually the better pure running back, if you ask me.
Yes.
But and Maffa's back. He had almost 1,000 yards last year. But Klubnik, to me, he botched that game against Miami in overtime. He kind of called his own number, and that was a mistake. And I look at Dabo, and this is going back to the initial point and this not using the portal thing. We get it. We get what he's doing. And on any individual season, if you think you got all these studs coming up, don't use the portal. You're good. However, the most important position on the field is Cade Klubnik, the quarterback. And what if they had gone out and gotten Dylan Gabriel? What if they had gone out and gotten Cam Ward? What if they had gone out and gotten a Riley Leonard? We'd be having a much different conversation about Clemson's ceiling, because Cade Klubnik holds back their ceiling without a doubt.
No, I totally agree. And I think this is a team. Look, they went 9-4 last year. They won their last 5 games. They were +6 in turnover margin. They were a top 8 total defense. They also just had moments, like you said, where it's like, man, what is this team doing? How are they not winning this game? They're just not good enough on offense. The Duke game, they kept fumbling the ball. The Miami game, they couldn't score. That being said, if they put it together, they could go 11-1 and make the college football playoff and win the ACC. They could also start 0-3. They played Georgia, App State, and NC State. They could start 0-3.
They could.
And they're such a
Dabo's too good a coach to go 0-3.
Yes, agreed.
Any individual one of those games, yeah, Georgia, we people have been talking about it. It's a schedule loss. If Clemson upsets Georgia, it would truly be an upset. And Billy and Pat talked about this on their show last week. It wasn't like that just a couple years ago. We didn't think of it like that. They were on an even playing field. They're no longer on an even playing field. And Georgia week 1, NC State, at FSU, Louisville, at Virginia Tech, South Carolina, late season trip to Pitt. There are landmines all over this schedule.
And I will say, if Tech has one thing going for it, they are due for this kind of win at home.
They are.
It is Virginia Tech as a program is due for one of these games to go well at home. And I think Clemson is due. I don't think they go undefeated. I don't think they go 11-1. I think they go 10-2. If you give them the Georgia loss, where does that other loss come from? My guess is it probably comes on the road, and it's probably Florida State or Virginia Tech.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right, because Death Valley is very hard to win. NC State just beat them last year, so that's probably not going to happen again this time with Clemson at home. I would take the under, on whatever Clemson's total is, because I'm just not years removed from Venables. I've talked about it with you. This idea that their defense is just going to be top 10 again every year, I'm not buying it. I know that they had 2 really good freshman defensive linemen last year, and Woods and Parker, they're both back. They should both be better. But this is a far cry from where they were when they won the 2017 title. It's such a far cry. And I know that was an elite defensive line, but we're not even close to that. Linebacker is very good with Barrett Carter. They got a couple like Barnes is like the hybrid safety linebacker type, and Woodez had 4 sacks last year. He's also back at linebacker. Sammy Brown, the highest ranked linebacker Clemson ever has in their history, is a freshman this year and will probably get on the field and probably play well. He's a 5-star. He's the number 14 to play in the country last year. But DB lost a lot. They had, what was their NFL losses? 6 guys lost. 5 of them were on defense. They had 7 portal guys go to power conference schools. A lot of talent went out the door on Clemson. I know they have more talent than all but 2 teams in the ACC, but this is it. It's not at the level, and they don't have the quarterback play to sustain these kind of losses and just expect to get to 10 wins in the regular season every year.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
And let me sum it up like this, Sam. It's the most susceptible Clemson has been in a decade. Like,
Yes. I mean, this team is not even close to what the team Tech played in the ACC Championship game was. Not even close to that team. And I think if you're Virginia Tech and you feel like you have the momentum and you feel like this game is at home, and you have the quarterback, this is the time that you get that big team at home. Like, it has to be this game if you're Virginia Tech.
If they're 7-2, or wait, so they would have to be, they could be 7-1 at this time. They could be 6-2, or they could be 5-3. I would lean towards the 6-2 or the 7-1. If we are also 6-2, 7-1, where like, this is the biggest game in Blacksburg since when? Would it be the last Clemson game in 2017?
Maybe. I mean, that like, yeah, probably.
Because we were undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say because it's happening later in the year, it will have more implications. Like, I think this game could be the game that decides a team that goes to the ACC title game, because I think you'll be very crowded in that top 5 or 6, and that tiebreaker is going to come into effect. And I think if Tech could win this game, they could go 9-3 this season and make the ACC title game. Like, it's not.
And if Clemson's only loss is that Georgia loss, and that's out of conference, and they're undefeated in the ACC, like, that's huge. And say our loss comes at Rutgers and we're undefeated in the ACC, or we only have 1 loss in the ACC and we can get the head-to-head against Clemson. Like, that's what we're shooting for. Like, we obviously want to have as few losses as possible, but you look at our schedule, you look at theirs, it would be a dream if both teams were 7-1 going into this.
Oh yeah. I mean, if it would be program changing if Tech came out of this game 8-1.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately program changing if they came out of this 8-1.
Because Lane is going to be in all of its glory on this night. Even if we're 6-2, even if we have 3 losses, like, Lane is going to be so fired up, because Clemson, they're going to be in the top 25. Like, I would almost guarantee that.
Yep. Top 20. And I'll tell you, Pete, though, the issue in Lane Stadium, the issue has never been Lane Stadium.
No, I know.
We have to have the performance to back it up.
Yeah.
And this is the game. Like, nationally, this is the game.
Yeah. It's so funny that this game is coming after the Syracuse trip. Like, that is just like the most look ahead in the most dangerous place that we can go.
Yeah, but I'll also say fans think of that. I don't know if players think like that.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's every time it does happen, we point, oh, it's a look ahead. And every time it doesn't happen, we never mention it.
I know.
So, but let's talk Duke.
Yeah, let's talk about Duke, because this is one of those ones on the schedule where it looks like it should be a win, right? They're 52 in the FPI, but in Lindy's they're 70, Athlon 69, Steele all the way down at 77. And without Elko, who overachieved massively, like he had Duke punching above their weight so hard. Like, it's really impressive what he was able to do in just his 2 short years in Durham. But Manny Diaz takes over for him. Manny was a head coach at Miami, where he went 21-15. Doesn't sound too bad, but if you look at some of the teams he lost to, and that amount of losses at Miami in a short period of time, it really wasn't that great. And especially when you consider his best season at Miami, 8-3 in 2020, which we know that year is kind of Mickey Mouse.
This is my sell team. Like, it might not be in the win total. I think their win total is like 5.5, 4.5, something like that. I'll have to check. I have so many win totals going through my head. And that's because they play Elon, Northwestern, UConn, Middle Tennessee. Those could be all 4 wins. They could have 4 wins right there. But if I'm betting against the spread in these games, which I will be, go against Duke, because I do not see them being a very good team. They lose so much from that team. I have them as one of my lowest in returning production in the Power 4. They bring over Malik Murphy, but he's a guy who's been consistently 3rd, 4th string at Texas. Big body guy, physically imposing, hasn't been able to put it together as a quarterback. And if Jordan Moore is a good wide receiver, but they lose so much on defense, man.
They lost a lot. They had 3 guys drafted, 2 offensive linemen, 1 defensive lineman. And then they had 7 portal guys go to power schools. So there was
Aeneas Peoples.
Including Aeneas Peoples, who we stole away. Their defensive tackle position is in shambles right now. Like they're like, their defensive ends are okay. The tackle position is in a lot of trouble. Linebacker maybe okay. You got Freeman and Morris are back, and they both put up really good tackle numbers. Freeman went over 100, and their DBs get 2 starters back. But that line for them defensively, Manny Diaz is going to have to work some of his defensive magic. And yes, he did a good job at Penn State running the defense, but I think he had a pretty turnkey operation thanks to someone we know very well. Brent Pry had Penn State's defense humming in the top 25 in all the statistical categories for a long time. And Manny Diaz got to walk into that, and he did a very good job. I don't think he's a bad defensive coordinator, but I'm not sure how good of a head coach he is. And with this dearth of talent, I haven't mentioned the Shrine 1000 much today because there hasn't been so much to speak of. But Duke has 4 players in the Shrine 1000. That is very low for a Power 5, Power 4 school. Like very, very low.
And I'll tell you, their offensive line was a concern coming out of spring. I would expect it to be a concern coming out of fall camp as well. I don't know if it's going to get any better.
They brought in starters to replace guys, like starters from other schools on the offensive line. The problem, Sam, those starters were from FCS.
Yep.
And so there's a little bit of an issue there. They did get a left tackle from UCLA. I don't think that was a starter, but they're trying to revamp the O-line a little bit. They don't have much experience there. They don't have a ton of experience outside of their back 7 on defense. You mentioned Moore. There's a Moore playing wide receiver. There's a Moore playing running back. Both of those guys are good. Like, and the wide receiving core and Malik Murphy could be interesting. Like, Malik Murphy's huge, by the way. Like,
he's massive.
I didn't realize he was 6'5", 238. Like,
he's a big dude.
That's huge.
He's a big dude.
So let's go to the overall thoughts on Duke, because we got to get to UVA. If their O-line is okay, if they're able to work some of these FCS transfers and do something good there, they'll have a decent offense, because I actually think they've got some guys who can play up there. And Malik Murphy, no, we haven't seen. He only got serious time in 2 games last year, but he was a very highly ranked recruit at Duke. He could thrive. He could thrive as the number 1 guy if they can protect him.
If the offensive line pulls a miracle, they could win 5 games. I don't see this team winning 6. I just don't. I don't think they have 6 wins on the schedule.
No. How quickly can Manny get that defense up to speed was a question I wrote down. Because if we play them later in the year, so maybe by the time our game rolls around, the scheme will have been figured out. Head won't be tying up their feet, that kind of thing. But they lack so much depth that by the 11th game of the year, we should have an advantage against Duke. We should have an advantage against UVA. That's something I'm going to talk about in a minute. But we'll bring a good crowd to Wallace Wade. This one's on the road. As always, we travel well to Duke. And at the week before Thanksgiving, Sam, how many Duke fans you think are attending this game when Duke probably has 6 losses at this point?
I will be at the game.
Okay, nice.
So there'll be at least 1 fan in the stands.
No, I said Duke fans.
7.
Yeah, about a baker's dozen.
I'll tell you something about the Triangle area in North Carolina. Not a lot of Duke fans. That's kind of an outside of North Carolina thing.
That's really funny you say that, because
a lot of Carolina blue, a lot of red and black, not a lot of Duke.
When I went to Brooklyn for the ACC Championship game against the Dukies, so many Duke fans. I mean, the freaking Barclays Center was legitimately over half full with Duke fans. Like, I was blown away. The bar beforehand, all Duke fans, because I feel like the Duke grads get finance jobs and move to North Jersey and New York.
Pretty much.
That's what they do. All right, let's get to UVA. This last team of the night, last game of the season, November 30th. After Thanksgiving, we play UVA. FPI 72, Athlon 72, Lindy's 58. Lindy's very high on the Hoos.
Yep.
Steel 65. And last year, they went 3-9 and 2-6 in the ACC. Tony Elliott is entering year 3. He is 6-16. One of the toughest schedules in the country, and a lot of injuries last year, Sam. Yeah, but they seemed to play a little bit better as the year went on.
They had moments last year. Like, I think they had 3 or 4 games where they played well. Take off orange and maroon glasses, right? Set them down. I worry that this team has done absolutely nothing in the defensive front 7 and on the offensive line. Like, they're
just bringing guys back.
They're bringing guys back who were really bad.
Yeah.
And that scares. Defensive line have a little bit more talent, but like, the offensive line is really bad. I don't think they have decided on a quarterback, because I don't think they have a good quarterback. I think they are kind of stuck in no man's land. Chris Tyree was a really good grab from Notre Dame. I think he's going to put up numbers. He's going to put up numbers. They also got the kid from UNC, blanking on his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. But they had 13. They went and grabbed 13 guys in the portal, and some of them will contribute.
Yeah, they will. I think they'll have guys who put up offensive numbers, whether it's Musket or whether it's Calandria. But again, they don't seem to be putting together the formula for a winning football team. And if I'm a UVA fan, or if I'm picking UVA, that worries me, because they do have a tougher schedule. And if you look at their schedule, their last 3 are at Notre Dame, SMU, and at Virginia Tech.
Yeah,
and that is going to be the first game in Blacksburg between Tech and UVA in years.
2018, right?
Yes. I think there is a chance that UVA is sniffing bowl eligibility sometime around, I think they'll win a few, and then they go Louisville, Clemson, North Carolina, Pitt, Notre Dame, SMU, Virginia Tech, and the bottom falls out.
Now, see, I don't want to do this, but you're going to make me do the bullish case for UVA, as whether it's a reverse jinx or just the fact that I'm trying to give the listeners the full gamut.
30-second elevator pitch on UVA. Ready, go.
Okay. Tyree comes into the wide receiver position. Kobe Pace, pretty solid running back last year, filling in for Hollins and another guy that they lost, Jones. So there is offensive talent on this team. And if Calandria is selected as the quarterback, he had a 69.6 QBR as a true freshman, 139 rating as a true freshman. Yes, he played poorly and turned the ball over at times, but he was thrown into an awful situation behind a terrible offensive line. If they can protect the quarterback slightly better, they have skill talent that can put up points. They played Louisville to the end last year. They lost to Miami in overtime. They beat Duke. They beat UNC. Like, they were playing a lot better up until Virginia Tech stepped into Charlottesville.
And I think the reason that game was so lopsided for Virginia Tech is because Tech dominated the line of scrimmage. And I don't see UVA competing on the line of scrimmage with Virginia Tech. I don't have much more analysis on them, to be honest, because to me, they look a lot like the same team from last year. And that's not good for Tony Elliott.
My last bit of analysis would just be on the defense. And it's really about a question, because if you look at their defensive statistics from last year, a lot of injuries, but they were terrible. Last in sacks per game in the ACC, 99th in the country in yards per play, dead last in the ACC in scoring defense. But guys are healthy. They build out a little depth by having other guys having to play. 6 of their top TFL guys, their top 6 TFL guys are back. Cam Butler, Jameer Carter, Chico Bennett, all on defensive line, Cam Robinson, James Jackson in the linebacking core, and Sanker, who was the only player worth a damn last year. He is back as well. 4 TFL for him on the season last year, 107 tackles, 11 pass breakups as a safety. Like, I know he had to play a little bit of everything, but 11 pass breakups is pretty ludicrous. And Dre Walker, who was a bright spot for them, shined as a freshman last year. He is also back in the defensive backfield. Clary and Green are back. Their back seven, actually their entire defense, like if it doesn't improve significantly, Tony Elliott has an issue because there is everyone's back. And this is not just like, oh, they're back and they played bad. Like Chico Bennett, Cam Butler, both those guys missed time. Like there's a lot of good players on this team that missed time. And so I think the defense will be significantly better than last year, better depth on the DL. They have at least like one stud at every level of the defense, but the offense is only going to seriously improve if the OL plays better and they can get one of those two quarterbacks to make a jump. And we talked about Tony Muskett going to ACC Media Days, and that may be being an indication that he's going to be the starter.
I think I agree with Muskett.
I kind of agree with you, though, that what you said initially, that they're going to battle it. Like, yeah, if you're taking a guy to media days, it does kind of indicate you think he's your guy. And Muskett apparently had a really strong spring coming back from his injury way quicker than people thought. Going into spring, they thought it was going to be Calandria and that he was recruiting the guys in the portal to come and play with him. Now they're not so sure. And so I hope that they go with Muskett because I just think he's a less mobile, less exciting version. And I don't want them to develop for the future as a Virginia Tech guy. And so, yeah, I want them to go with Muskett. I think if UVA was smart, even though I'm not watching practice, I'm looking at what I saw last year. I think you should go with a true freshman who outplayed in every statistical category than he really should have. I mean, Muskett had 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Calandria had 13 and 9. Is that a big difference? No. But one has played almost zero college football prior to last year. And the other kid was at Monmouth toiling away in FCS, playing well. But when he got to UVA and you put him behind a bad line, didn't go well. Put the more mobile guy behind a bad line if you're UVA and see what you can do. You know I hope they're terrible. And I think I lost Sam just now. I don't know what happened to him. We'll see if he rejoins the feed. But that covers pretty much everything. Maybe the storm hit in the 757. We just got to the end of our thing. Obviously, both Sam and I think that we're going to beat UVA. You can see I've got the now that I'm alone in the screen here, you can see the beautiful Southwest Virginia number 7 hat I got on. I think we're beating UVA. I expect to win. It's in Lane, first game in Lane in forever. I was going to ask Sam for his record prediction for the final 6 games that we talked about tonight. Because mine, I said 5-1 for the first 6 games. I'm going 4-2 because I think we're going 9-3 overall. That's the way I'm putting it. And I'm looking at where we could lose the games. It's GT, it's Q's, it's Clemson, and it's maybe Duke as well. Like I put the question mark by Duke, but this is why I don't like breaking this down in terms of like I'm the one that writes the show notes, so I'm the one that decided this. But like I said, 5-1 for the first. I'm going to go 4-2 for the second because I think we're going 9-3 overall. Those 3 losses could come absolutely anywhere. But I think this is a 9-3 football team. That's what I think about Virginia Tech this year. And I got Sam back. We lost you. What happened to your computer? Did it die on you?
What is up? We had we had some slight laptop issues. I think I might have been running some code in the background that drained the battery. So, oopsie.
All right. So what do you think the record is for the final 6 games of the season, Sam?
5-1. And I think that back-to-back Syracuse Clemson, I don't think Virginia Tech is a deep enough football team to win both those games. I think the other games, the Boston College, Georgia Tech, Duke, UVA, Tech is just simply more talented than those teams. And I think Virginia Tech will show that. And I think this current roster and coaching staff, they seem to have figured out how to beat lesser teams. It's beating the good teams. And I think that Syracuse is tough. And the defensive front 7 for Clemson is tough. So I think 5-1.
Yeah. I said 4-2, but with that caveat as like we could go 4-2 in the first 6 games and 5-1 in the second. Like I think the overall record's 9-3. We'll talk more about like how I see the whole season playing out and how you see it playing out when we do our season preview. But like if I'm adding yours together, Sam, that's a 10-2 record because you had 5-1 on our first episode and you got 5-1 tonight.
Every year in college football for the past, well, pretty much since the college football playoff at this point, which almost 10 years, we've seen a team that goes about 500 and returns everybody and has good momentum and has the quarterback play shoot up to the 10-win range. We've seen you do it and make a national title game. Washington increased by about 3 games last year, made the national title game. We've seen Missouri go from a 6-6 team to a 10-2 team in the SEC and beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. It has happened time and time again in modern college football. And I think there is such a power to having an old, experienced team when so many teams are built off the transfer portal. So looking at this holistically from college football, I think Tech is the best argument and shows all the signs to be that team that shoots up to the 10-2 record. I don't think they're a national title contending team like Washington or TCU were, but I think this is a team that is maybe even a little bit better than the bullish Hokie fans think.
Well, that's lovely. I love to hear that, Sam. That's awesome. And that's the hard part about breaking this schedule down. I said while you're off camera is just picking where losses come is so impossible. Even if you're breaking it down 6-6, like I have been thinking for months, this is a 9-3 football team. And I don't know where those losses are coming from. It could be Rutgers, Miami, and GT. Like it could be, Miami and then Clemson and Syracuse. Like I don't know where they're coming from, but I just think a team that's still building, that went 7-6 last year. We've got 3 losses in us. That's me right now. My opinion could change as we move through the rest of the summer here.
Yeah, I think I don't want to overreact to those first few non-conference games because I think the talent level is such a disparity, but like I don't see the bottom falling off this team. Like I was thinking today, like if Kyron Drones gets hurt on the first series against Vanderbilt, what is Tech's record? And I was like, 7-5-ish with Colin Schlee.
Interesting.
Like
I don't want to think about that.
I don't want to think about it, but
no, but I hadn't because what is the surrounding talent level is what you're saying. Like how many wins are we relying on Kyron for? And that's because good quarterbacks win you a couple games you shouldn't.
Yeah, and it's probably 2 or 3 maximum.
Yeah.
And so I think this Tech team is poised for it. And if it's not this season, Pete, it's going to be another few years.
Okay. Well, listen, that was a lot of fun. We got through all of our opponent previews. We'll save Mystery Hokie for when Sam's on his laptop.
I have it written down if you want to do it.
Let's save it. Let's save it for next episode. We're actually going to have me and Rich are doing an episode in a couple days. We're going to have a Mystery Hokie on that show along with a very special guest. So make sure you are checking the channel this week because we got an awesome episode coming up in a couple days. But Sam, thank you for preparing all those notes. Thank you for getting everything out. Do you have anything to plug before we get out of here?
We are finalizing the weekly schedule for football season. It is going to be awesome. Rich Luttenberg, the aforementioned Rich Luttenberg, will be having some holistic season preview articles coming up. We'll have our staff predictions. And then again, a ton of stuff on the podcast coming up. It is going to be time to board my flight to Nashville any day.
I know, man. I'm so jacked up. I can't wait. I cannot wait for freaking Nashville, but we have so much more stuff to bring you guys, including the trip to Richmond on 8/17, 4 to 7 p.m. at Ardent Craft Ales. Make sure you show up in Scott's Edition and join me and Sam. And if we have some willing participants, if we have some lucky listeners that just enjoy the pod so much, maybe you'll be on that show. If we're doing a live recording and you got a knowledge base that can compete at the highest level, we want you to be a guest on the show. So we'll get something going down there when we're in Richmond, but make sure you come out that day, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the Sons of Saturday YouTube channel, as well as the Two Deep and Sons of Saturday podcast feeds to stay in touch with everything we got going on. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.